Astronauts to the moon.
And welcome to Our Natural Rights here on alltalkradio.net. My name is Shelly Johnson, and I had quite a few people suggest that I introduce myself because apparently nobody knows who I am. So now you do. My guest this evening is Jaron Campy. I ran across him as I was digging deeper into the flat earth concepts, and I find his arguments quite interesting. He's been through the steps of challenging his own belief systems, which you might recall I refer to as BS, and has found those systems wanting. It has been strongly suggested that I quit beating this dead horse. While I will admit that believing one way or another in the globe versus flat earth concept will not bring us the freedom that we're all desiring so strongly, what it does do is continue to pry minds open. It's because nothing we have been taught is truth. When you open your minds and are willing to question everything, then the power of the system is diminished more and more. We have viewers on this show tonight that we didn't have before when we discussed this concept. So I believe that it is quite prescient for us to have this conversation tonight and to at least energetically help counter the gigantic lie that is our daily lives based upon the illusion that the system is the world, and the system is what we've all been enslaved by. And so it's really, really important to challenge every aspect of that as far as I'm concerned. So having laid that table, welcome, Jaron, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion this evening.
Thank you very much, Shelly. It's nice to be here. Nice to talk to you.
So could you tell us a little bit about your history, how you came to this as a subject matter, and you know, how you integrated that into a YouTube channel that's got like 25,000 viewers or something, a lot of viewers?
Yeah, I saw today almost 3,500 subscribers, which is incredible to me, shocking. I had certainly no aspirations of that when I started. Basically, to kind of give you a quick rundown of where I come from, I was raised in a Catholic environment, extremely Catholic. My mom is a director of ministry at a church. My godfather is a bishop. I went to a Catholic junior high, all boys, Jesuit-run Catholic high school. So I was definitely in the religion mix. Mm-hmm. I'd say around the age of maybe 17, 18, I kind of started to have doubts and kind of fell away. I wouldn't say fully. I didn't become an atheist or anything like that. But when I met my wife, which would have been about 2009, 2008, she came from a family of very devout Bible-believing Christians. Now, she was in the same place in her life that I was, that she didn't really hold tight to those beliefs either. And so coming together, we kind of didn't really touch on that subject, on the religion subject at all, until we got married. And we knew that her family being Christian, my family being Catholic, we had a question right away is what kind of service did we want to have for our wedding? It was really important to us to cater to both families, but not, you know, have one over the other. So we decided to go totally secular. We actually had one of my friends go up and get a license to marry us. And one thing that, you know, I'll never forget was the night before our wedding at the rehearsal dinner, my wife's brother-in-law, who is a preacher, he has his own parish, or not a parish, what is it called? His own
congregation.
His own church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, he has his own church. He's a Christian, Bible-believing. He's a big preacher. He's got a church in Montana with thousands of members. And so he came to us and told us, who is marrying you guys tomorrow? And I said, oh, actually, one of my friends is just going up and getting a license, and he's taking care of it. And he said, well, you too do know that your marriage will not be seen in the eyes of God if a preacher or a pastor doesn't say the service. And this is what he said to my wife, you know, the night before we get married. And it just really kind of cemented more than anything. Like, man, what are these people doing, you know, saying things like that?
Yeah.
You know, we wanted to have our own thing. We just told them kind of bug off, forget about it. So right after we were married, we really wanted to dig into what we both believed and come up with something. If we're going to have kids together, we're going to live together forever, we wanted to really dig down deep into it. And so we did that, and we came to the conclusion that the Bible was written by men. There was a lot of things in there that didn't jive with what we believed or thought, so we were able to kind of move that aside. There is truth in there, I think. There is great wisdom in there, but there's also a control mechanism built into it.
Yep.
And so that was really easy for us to see. And so, to be honest, I mean, we quickly became full-fledged atheists. Once I had come to the point where I said, the Bible's not real, I said, well, then everything else is BS, as you put it. You know, I said, so I quickly became an atheist and started to get interested in debating against Christians and those who had religious beliefs. And the one thing I couldn't get rid of, it was easy for me to get rid of Jesus. It was easy for me to get rid of a savior and to see Revelation as nothing more than prophecy, which looked like it was trying to be fulfilled by the system. And I could never get rid of a feeling that I felt created. And that's a weird way to put it, or I just felt like the world could not be an accident. And so I really wanted, before I debated anybody who was into religion, I said, I need to really look into this and make sure I fully believe in evolution and I fully believe in the Big Bang. And that's when my eyes were really opened, because I saw that science is nothing more than another belief system.
Exactly.
And that's what's hard for people to believe. And I understand why people don't grasp that. They say, how could you argue against science? How could you ever see that as being false? And I just, the sad part to me is I think people have not done the research into it. And I think they have gone through life like I did, where they were religious or were brought up with some idea about religion. And as soon as they saw religion was false, they think of the world as, well, you're either religious or you're an atheist.
Right.
And so, you know, they fell away quickly just like I did and went straight to atheism. But if you've ever been in these Facebook forums or wherever there's a forum going on, these guys that argue on behalf of atheism and science are brain dead.
They are, and they're just trying to jerk the chains of the Christians, and that's
absolutely
really all they're there to do. And I don't know that they're necessarily wedded to their own philosophy, but they sure do love making trouble.
No, that's all they're there for. And what's funnier is if you were a full-fledged atheist and believed in science, what are you doing in, you know, theism versus atheism forums? And why are these guys that come to my channel, I mean, I'm talking about flat earth, and these guys are in there screaming how much of a moron I am and how smart they are. And it's like, how did you stumble on my video? I mean, if you are an intellectual and you are as smart as you think, how could you have ever even clicked on a flat earth video? I mean, if I'm on YouTube and I see a video that says that my pink My Little Pony is God, I'm not going to click on that video because I think it's nonsense. So I don't understand how these guys end up on my channel unless they have a question themselves.
Of course they do, and I think most of us who've kind of been through the ringer as far as religion tend to do that boomerang effect into the atheistic camp, only to realize that they're just as big a bunch of idiots as anybody else. So,
totally.
So you and I have pretty much gone through the same process, and we've ended up back with the awareness that the we and what we see on our earth, on our world, are not accidents. Very clearly, they're not accidents. So that kind of strikes a balance, I guess, or a space between the Bible worshipers and the atheists. And I think it's probably a more rational place to be than to be, entrenched on either side, because you've already been there, done that, and you've seen both aspects. So
I totally agree. I think that the point that I try to come from is once we realized the Bible was nonsense, and then once we realized atheism was nonsense, I said, that's it. I'm wiping the slate clean, and I'm going to start with, what was I given at birth, basically, and that is your brain and your eyes.
Yep.
And I said, I'm not going to believe in what men say, because as I kept looking, men told me my whole life that the Bible was the truth. And once I saw that that was not, then I said, well, men have told me my whole life that science is the truth. And once I saw that there's some issues there and that they're used as control, I said, I'm just going to go from my eyes, my heart, my brain, and let everything fall into place. And over the last, it's been about 1.5 years or 2 years, I'd say that I feel so much better. I feel so much freer. I feel like I understand the world. I can see where different people come from. Mm-hmm. I'm no longer locked into something that I have to believe because so-and-so does, or I have to agree because so-and-so says. And,
exactly.
It's so great to watch Richard Dawkins and these guys and actually see that, to me, they look like fools now. Whereas before I said, man, these guys are such geniuses.
Yeah, all of these systems and people who tell us to believe this and tell us to believe that are just another version of authority, and authority is another version of master. And when you believe in the slave master paradigm, then that's when you sit around and you take the word of all of these pseudo intellectuals or pseudo spiritualists, and you take their word for it, and you are taught to disavow what your own senses tell you every day.
Yeah, it's terrible, because I think that's the one thing that we have. That's the one thing that I hold most dear to myself is, what do I see? What do I feel? How do I interpret the world? And to have that come through someone else's eyes is a terrible thing to waste. Your life really is a terrible thing to waste.
Yeah, your brain, your mind, your rationale. So basically, we're beginning at this premise where we both say that it's important to use our own brains, and belief systems are not smart. So,
absolutely.
Tell me, okay, let's broach the premise of this whole thing, because, like I said, there's going to be people on this show that weren't on the last time I had a guest speaking about this, and let's just lay some basic, what we consider to be factual information out there.
Okay. I mean, for me, it really started with what do I see? Like I said, and I know that it's simple to say that you walk outside and look in any direction and the world is flat. The horizon is flat. And those things can't be, I don't know what the world would look like on a sphere, but I'm assuming it might look similar. However, I have been on many plane flights in my life, and I do remember always looking out and clearly seeing the horizon rise with me and clearly seeing that it remained flat. Now, this is right away something that I saw people disagreeing with who believe in the sphere Earth, but not disagreeing, but by saying that they saw a curve. Now, that right away caught me off guard, because I said, hold on a second. You're saying something that isn't true, because I know I've been on a plane, and I know I've looked out the window, and I can watch videos on YouTube, and any kind of real camera or real view of the horizon stays flat.
Right.
So it bothered me that I had people saying, you're lying, you're a liar, there's a curve. And, I mean, this is so bad that I called a friend of mine who's actually a pilot, and I asked him, tell me the truth, does the Earth curve when you get up high enough? And he said, yeah, the Earth curves. And I said, what? Well, by kind of digging deeper, I came to the conclusion, and he kind of agreed, that he had been taught that even though pilots fly by staying even with the horizon, that he was under the assumption that he saw a curve. And this is a pilot. And by talking to him and showing him some videos and saying, are you sure you see a curve? Well, finally he agreed that he doesn't, that he had thought he saw one.
Indoctrination is a crazy thing, isn't it?
Right. I mean, that's crazy when you have a pilot telling you see something that he doesn't see. Mm-hmm. Very scary. So that was kind of a start to everything. And from there, I think that the biggest thing for me was thinking about water. And this is something that I hope everyone does or thinks about, because this is the proof that you need, is water always remains flat. Now, when I say that, I get a lot of people who comment who will send me a picture of a drop of water falling off a leaf, and they show that it's in a ball formation.
Okay.
And I say, okay, you're not getting where I'm coming from.
Let's
I said
talk
that
about
water that's
bodies
dropping,
of water, yeah.
Right. I said that drop of water will end up landing in a pool of water or a puddle or a pond, and water always finds its flatness, no matter which way you take a pan of water, be it a foot wide or 10 feet wide or 20 feet wide. If you take that pan of water, the water in the pan will find its flatness.
Right.
So once I saw that, I couldn't grasp around my mind, how then can we live on a sphere where the water must be curved? And if you just look at the mathematics of a sphere or the mathematics of a circle, all elements of a circle will have some degree of curve. It can't have flat, and have angles or things like that. I mean, a circle
Right.
is all curves.
Right.
So once I started to think that, I just got really lost in it and said, this doesn't make any sense. So I started looking into the mathematical formulas of how to figure out what the curve should be between two areas. So say, for instance, I live in California. So it was interesting to me to figure out how much curve should there be between California and Hawaii.
Okay.
Because I thought that would be a good visual representation for me. And in doing the mathematics, which you just take 8 times the distance between the two areas and then times that same distance again. So I think the distance is around 2,500 miles. So you take 8 times 2,500 times 2,500. And then by figuring that out, the actual answer was 770 miles. Now, when you really wrap your head around that, you have to understand that to believe in a sphere Earth, you must then believe that between California and Hawaii, there is a 770-mile-high curvature between those two states.
Okay.
At that point, it was no longer a question to me because I asked people who believe in the sphere, show me, measure it, please. You're scientists. You believe in science. You believe in evidence. You believe in testing and experimentation. Show me the measurement of 770 miles between California and Hawaii. And they all pass it off by calling me a fool and an idiot, and it's already been proved, and I should go back to 500 years ago and live with the ancient people who didn't know what they were talking about, and that's when I just started to see.
The ancients who believed what they saw, felt, experienced, and yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before science came along and decided to tell people, no, what you see is wrong, what we tell you is right.
Yep.
So I'd say that from there, I just started really looking into every aspect of it, and there is nothing that leads me to believe in any way at all, that we live on a sphere. Just taking the simple facts of somebody living upside down. And I know people laugh at that and they say, no, to each person's perspective, they are right side up. Well, I try to get to people to understand what you're talking about is magical. What you're talking about
exactly.
is make-believe. I mean, that's great that you can say that somebody in Australia and somebody in the United States, to each of them, they're both standing upright. But from an outsider's view, they're on a sphere. Well, that's when I started looking at NASA's videos, and I said, why can't NASA, who's flying around the spherical Earth in the ISS, why don't I get to see them zoom in and see, I want to see New York City upside down. And people say, well, you won't see that because it's right side up. And I said, then you don't get it. What you're talking about is magical.
Exactly.
There has to be somebody upside down while the other person is right side up on a sphere. And then you really start looking into NASA and the pictures they show us and how far they've actually gone to prove what they say. And they haven't.
No, they haven't. They just issue edicts, and they're part of the system of authoritarianism, and we're all supposed to just bow down to the gods of scientism.
Absolutely. And you keep looking deeper, and then you get into the Masonic background of NASA and where they came from and the Nazi beginning. And from there, it all just starts to flow and make sense. And it's sad because it's not a very good testament to the intelligence of human beings, who I believe are far more intelligent than they come across now, because you talk to somebody and tell them you don't believe in the moon landings, and they will laugh in your face and call you a fool. Mm-hmm. And that's upsetting because the evidence is just not there. And most people have just accepted it because if you don't, it means you don't believe in science. And so they just accept it.
Well, sure.
And I mean, you can ask them questions like, okay, so we landed there 6 times. Why can't NASA send a satellite which will orbit the moon at such a distance that it should be very easy for them to take photos of the lander or the rover? And they just laugh at you.
Or the flag that's still supposedly there.
Or the flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll show you pictures that they say Hubble took where you can zoom in all the way on the pictures and there's like a little mark. And it's like, there you go, there it is. Another thing is people will talk about the shooting the laser off the moon and the supposed mirrors that they put there that'll bounce that laser back. And when you watch that show, which is the Mythbusters show, where they just basically fell into the laps of NASA and said whatever they were supposed to.
Right.
But one of the things that they point out is that they shoot off, I want to say it's like 2 or 3, can't remember the exact amount. I want to say trillion, but it's actually more than that. They shoot off quadrillion, right. So they shoot off 2 or 3 quadrillion photons at the moon. And then they say, and we're lucky if we get back 1 to 3. Now, that may make you think that they're saying quadrillion. No. They mean 1 to 3 photons. So they shoot off this laser of quadrillion photons, and they call it proof when they get back 1 to 3, which I've done the percent, and it's actually 0.15 zeros, so 0.0000000000000. Do that 15 times, 15%.
Oh,
I mean,
Lordy.
how is that proof of anything? Let me try and use that as proof anywhere. This is proof, this tiny little percentage that we can barely even understand.
Sure.
So the whole thing just it's sad because I hate to tell people to their face that what they've believed their entire life is wrong, but I mean, I was in the same boat. Ask me 5 years ago, tell me we didn't go to the moon, tell me we didn't live on a sphere. Sadly, I would have laughed in the face of the person telling me that.
Well,
but that's what I was taught to do.
Exactly. That's what we've all been taught, to accept that
right.
The authority of our elders, or the authority of the people in power, or the authority. And that the whole premise of the show that I do every week is to question the premise of authority and to question the premise of the system that we've supposedly been given for our benefit. So that's why I really like talking about this, because if you can wrap your mind around the premise of a flat earth, then you can conceptually consider any of the other systemic lies that we've been exposed to.
Right. You kind of don't know how deep it goes, but once you realize this, you realize it's the potential is infinity.
Exactly.
I mean, who knows where it begins or where it ends, but once you can grasp this, the rest is easy.
Yeah, it's all downhill from there.
Right.
So people automatically react to this discussion by asking, so where's the edge? How can the oceans stay contained? And my question to them is, well, I think the likelihood of the oceans being contained on a flat model sure surpasses the premise of the oceans being contained on a globular model.
Absolutely.
But can we fall off the edge? Where's the edge? How do we define the nature of this plane versus planet? How finite is it? How infinite is it?
Right. And I think there's a couple different opinions out there, and I'm not at a place yet that I can, make a definitive judgment on that, because I haven't seen it. As I said, I believe now in trusting my eyes, and so I have not seen any kind of edge, so I can't say that I believe in that more than I can believe in the sphere, which I have not seen either. So, but the model that looks correct to me is if you do look up ice wall or the Antarctic ice wall, there is a pretty large chunk of ice that kind of comes right out of the water and cuts around what they call the continent of Antarctica. But in the flat Earth model, you can actually see that Antarctica actually wraps around the Earth as if you're looking at a pizza, imagine Antarctica being the crust.
Okay.
And that's, again, hard for people
all around
to look,
the edge. Yep.
Right.
And the wall is supposedly something like 150 feet, or something similar to that. And I know we have some diaries and some old videos of Admiral Byrd and some of the commentary he had, which I found fascinating. And
yeah, it's very cool.
And then we have the Antarctic Treaty that all of these really big, important countries of the world have all signed on to, and right. we won't touch Antarctica. It will not be developed. It will not be resourced. It will not be pillaged. It will just remain pristine. And all of these countries are agreeing to that. When on this planet has that ever been the case?
Never.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, is when do you know of any land that wasn't seized upon and held via war or military force? And The two things that you mentioned are excellent, but I actually think the better proof in my mind is Captain Cook, James Cook.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you can actually find some of his journals, and at one point he tried to go around the continent of Antarctica, and it took him, I think, like 3 years at that time, and he never even did it. He basically was trying to go around it and could never find an inlet, because if you look at the kind of pizza version of the Earth, he was going around the outside edge of the entire thing, where he meant to be going around what he thought was a continent at the bottom.
Exactly.
So you can read into that. And there's also another ship. I can't think of the name right now. It's out of Britain. I'll think of the name here shortly. But that ship also, and this is recent, tried to navigate around the southern hemisphere, and it ended up taking them the amount of time that they could have gone around the world 5 times. And
interesting.
they actually got back to where they started, but it took them 5 times as long as it should have. So those kind of things, when you look into them and you see that no one's pulling your chain, these are actual facts. You really start to see, well, where are the lies coming from? And it's kind of easy to see that the only reason we know of Antarctica being a continent is because pictures shown to us that are clearly animations and composite drawings.
Exactly. And paintings like guys like Matt Boylan.
Right. He was a big helper in me coming to this conclusion, too. Yeah, he's excellent.
So in my process of learning to question everything, I used to have this little button that I would wear around, and it really inflamed my parents, but it said question authority. So I've been doing this for a long time. But we need to comprehend that what we've been taught to trust is everything outside what our 5 senses, and sometimes, the feeling like you had of being created. It flies in the face of all of those experiences. And,
right.
And we've learned to take some authority's word for things. So we can do our own experiment here. Like you said, you can travel from point A to point B, and you can visually see no shift in horizon level, no matter how high you get. And you can also experience absolutely no curvature as you're watching, the land pass by underneath you. And plenty of us have had plane trips where we could implement this strategy if we chose to, and prove it to yourself. And this is something I appreciate about you, is that you're always saying, please don't take my word for it. Please don't take my research's word for it. Do your own empirical studies and prove it to yourself. Because if we can get people to recognize this possibility, and it is not just our job, but I mean, you and I are on the same page here. If we can get people to question this basic premise, then it's going to be a lot easier for them to start questioning 9/11 and start questioning
right.
The view of American exceptionalism around the world, which is supposedly the light on shining light on the hill, and in reality we're the biggest thugs on the planet.
Absolutely.
And I need to start saying plane instead of planet, because to me that makes more sense. But this is the big lie that needs to be uncovered, and if you can manage this one, then everything else is a gimme as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, I think that the scientific community, the atheist community, is so big on asking religion for proof. Show us your empirical evidence. Show us your proof. Show us the proof that God exists. Show us this. Show us that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not allowed to ask the same thing of them. And that's something that I've just realized in the past, like I said, year and a half, where I started questioning these things and asking for proof of evolution, because it does not make sense to me. And when you listen to somebody like Richard Dawkins, who is an evolutionary biologist, meaning he should be the foremost authority. Mm-hmm. And on one of my videos, I've got a video of him explaining it. And it is seriously could not come across worse if it was said by an 8th grader or even an 8-year-old. He sounds like a fool. He's going through the steps and he says, well, we were something like germs, and then we became something like a worm, and then we grew legs, and we stepped out of the water and became something like a lizard. And just the way he's describing it, you're like, where are you getting that from? Those are guesses. Those are estimates. Great. It's a great theory. The theory of evolution is a great idea. But when we have no evidence of any species turning to another species, how then do we have the millions of species that have ever existed on this earth.
Exactly,
And
with no missing link in any of the evolutionary patterns.
right. It's just it's kind of sad, and Lawrence Krauss was a big one. I mean, listening to him, I now think the guy is a comedian because he came out with that book, Something from Nothing, and even admits in his videos that he did it to capture theists basically and God believers and get them to believe in his cosmology. And it just makes no sense when I have a video where he talks to Stephen Colbert. It's great because he goes on and saying about how, well, this nothing has weight. And Stephen Colbert says, hold on a second. How does nothing have weight? And he says, well, we used to think it didn't, but now we realize that nothing has all these different gases and and you're like, whoa, hold on a second. You said nothing. Hold on. Just start with nothing. How do you then say, well, nothing has blankety, blankety, blank? And so he's just funny to listen to. And when I start listening to all these guys, they're all toting the same rope. I mean, same thing with Neil Tyson deGrasse or Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes.
The same thing. These guys are just, they believe what they're saying. I don't think that they are, out to lie and confuse people. I think they really believe it, but I understand why. I went to school too. You went to school too.
Mm-hmm.
These are taught to you as fact. You're not taught to question science, and that's my biggest problem with it, is why, say, a 6th grade classroom or an 8th grade classroom, we have very smart, intelligent kids in this world, and why doesn't a teacher say, okay, this week we're going to talk about the sphere Earth versus the flat Earth. I want you guys to come up with your, how many people believe in the sphere Earth? And half the group raises their hand. And how many think it's flat? Half the group raise their hand. Okay, come up this week with some evidence. Come up with some tests. And let's talk about it throughout the week. That's what science is all about.
Exactly.
That's what science is questioning everything. And the fact that we have tests in science class, they give you a test and you answer it and you're told you're right or wrong based on, it's like if we had a test that said name the planets when we were in 6th grade, we all would have put Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
But now that's wrong. So how can something that's tested with right or wrong answers be changed throughout life? That's what tells me science is supposed to be. Science is supposed to be the constant changing, the constant goal should be truth,
mm-hmm.
and not just ever settle and say, this is truth, gravity is true, because it's not. And if you look deep enough, even scientists will admit, well, no, we haven't never really proven gravity.
Exactly.
We just know it exists.
Well, let's go a little further into that gravity conversation because, the first time I had a conversation with somebody about this and I was asking them, well, explain gravity to me. And he goes, oh, you mean magic? And I'm going,
absolutely.
I guess that's the best answer I've gotten so far. So let's talk about gravity.
Okay. I'm actually releasing a video tonight. I almost finished it, but I will release it tonight that talks a lot about gravity because it shows you remember the Bill Nye TV shows we used to watch as kids,
mm-hmm,
right?
The science guy, yep.
There you go. And he explains gravity, and it's hilarious. There's even a little scene where you've got a little girl. She's like a drill instructor, and she's yelling at these kids, what is gravity? And they say, it holds us to the earth. And what else does it do? It helps the moon rotate the earth. It's like this drill instructor kid, drilling it into these kids. It's really hilarious. But yeah, gravity to me is it's magic sauce because
exactly.
I mean,
because it's strong enough to affect the moon, and it's weak enough to allow a tsetse fly to escape into the atmosphere. Absolutely.
Or what holds me to the earth, because I have weight, and is the same thing that allows the moon to orbit the earth. It just, none of it really makes sense at all. And one of the biggest things to me is just recently, now this new accepted idea of dark matter and dark energy, right?
Uh-huh.
Which have never been observed. And you can look that up in Wikipedia. It'll tell you right there that dark matter and dark energy are 95% of the known universe, yet have never been observed. That sentence right there should have people throw science out the window.
Exactly.
Because what they saw was that the things happening in deep space did not jive with their version of gravity. So knowing what I know about science, which is when things don't meet the tests and the evidence, you're supposed to throw out the theory. But rather than throw out the theory of gravity, they created dark energy and dark matter to explain their theory of gravity. So we've never observed it, yet 95% of the known universe is dark energy and dark matter. And we're teaching this in schools. This is now the educational curriculum.
And isn't that a little bit like, well, we don't have any pictures of the Earth, so we're going to invent a moon landing so that we can say we took pictures of the Earth?
Doesn't it sound exactly the same?
Very similar.
Yeah. So it's very scary, but at the same time, I have faith in the human race. If there's anything I have faith in, it's that we're going to wake up from this. It may not be today, it may not be this year, it may not be next year, but it's coming. There's no way that the human brain can get this new evidence and fight it for too long.
Yeah, we can't put this genie back in the bottle, and it's getting pretty obnoxious and pretty deliberate and pretty blatant. But that's what happens when truth becomes known at a fairly decent percentage of the population. Is that it's no longer you can't put it back in the bottle, and so
just keep asking those questions, right? I mean, I keep asking. I'm almost willing to debate a Bill Nye. I'm willing to debate these guys on one premise only, and that's show me the curvature between California and Hawaii. Measure it.
That should
Measure
do
the
it.
curve. They won't do it. I mean, there's no way. They would laugh me off and say, I'm not debating. It's easy for them to go and debate Ken Ham, who believes in the Bible and Noah's Ark. That's easy for them. So they feel very proud. Hey, I'm Bill Nye. I'll go debate this Ken Ham at the Creation Museum and laugh at him. And that's very easy for them. But debating somebody who's just going to say, show me this curvature that you say is on the Earth. Why can't I measure it? You can go out and do it on a 20-mile, I don't know if you've seen one of my videos, but in one of my videos, there's a picture taken from Michigan of Chicago, which is...
Yes, that superior mirage thing.
Yeah, superior BS is what it is.
Yeah, I actually came across that picture like yesterday, and then I looked at your video today, and I'm going, that's what I was looking at. That's exactly what I thought when I looked at it.
It's absolutely insane. They say it's a mirage, which they even say it's inverted, which do they not know what the word means? Inverted means backwards or inside out, but you actually see the real buildings.
Yes. It's
not inverted. It's not upside down. It's not, I forgot what they call that other thing, Fata Morgana or something. I don't know what the name of it is. But it's where you get have you ever seen where a ship and then above it will be like a mirage of a ship upside down?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, that's nothing like this. This is clearly, on a very clear day, you can see on a flat surface further than they think. And I think the way they got away with the spherical idea was they took the distance that your eye can see and basically said at that point it begins to curve. And they were able to get away with that for a long time. But what they failed to realize is there is some days that are super clear, and on those super clear days you can see physically further than their theory allows. And on a 25,000-mile circumference ball, you would not be able to see many things. And if you start looking it up, you will see a ton of people who claim they see much further than what the theory would allow.
Right.
The people who see the Statue of Liberty from 40 or 50 miles away. I mean, there's a ton of examples that could not be possible on a spherical Earth.
I agree. The concept of lighthouses, I think, is fascinating too. That they've been, put in place so that the boats from a mighty distance can see them and not run up against the rocks. But I mean, the mighty distance is the issue there.
Right. Yeah, especially when you just do the math and figure out how far they should be able to see the lighthouses from, and they see them from sometimes easily double that distance.
Exactly.
And the one question I get that kind of makes me laugh, and I understand where they're coming from, but when you talk about flat Earth, many people just say, so if I'm standing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, why can't I see all the way to the ends of the Earth? And I said, well, nothing about the flat Earth then gives you Superman vision.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, you'll never see that far. I'm sorry that's kind of built into their model. By knowing that you have a distance limit of how far you can see,
yes,
it allows them to tell you that after that, the curve begins.
Exactly.
And that's just not factual. It's not true. One thing you mentioned about being in a plane and going up and seeing the horizon rise with you. There's a video also I have that shows if you go on your street or go somewhere where there's a curve, so say a hill.
Right.
If you raise the camera up as you're going on the hill, the curved horizon will always drop, because if you're on a ball and you raised up high enough, you would actually see over the ball. Just like if you're on a curve, you're going to raise up and see over the curve.
Yep.
The only time you wouldn't see over something is if it's an endless plane or a flat surface, to where no matter how high you go, that horizon stays right with you. There's nothing else that explains how the horizon can stay at the same height at 35,000 feet as it does when you're standing on flat ground.
Exactly. That's absolutely true, and I think that one was the clincher for me, honestly. I watched video after video of people observing miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles of flat horizon. And, based upon the mathematical premise that at some point that curve has to kick in, and it never did, that was the one for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the easiest proofs to show people, and they still argue against it. And I think eventually they'll realize that it just doesn't make sense, even mathematically, which they love to throw math at you.
Yeah, but they're making up math formulas just to explain stuff that they can't explain. They
absolutely
didn't Einstein come up with some special math that was supposedly to help explain the theory of relativity? Or, I mean, come on, guys, really?
Yep, and it's sad because, as I put it in one of my videos, math should prove reality, and it does. For instance, if I had $16 and I need to split it up between 4 people, the first thing I would do is, say I take 1,600 pennies and divvy them out between the 4 people, and each person ends up with 400 pennies. Well, that's now a fact. And by doing mathematics, I can prove the reality of that. I can take 16, divide it by 4, do the little equation, draw it out, bring down your zeros, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to come out with $4. But you can't then say, well, I'm going to make a new math formula that is not based on reality. It's just going to be based on mathematics alone, and that will be my proof of something that doesn't work in reality. And that's what Einstein has done for special relativity and things like that are, even Einstein said about his theory of relativity that no one will ever be able to prove it right. And yet it is the fact that they base the entire universe upon.
Yeah.
And he said it can never be proven right. And
well, how convenient.
Yeah, really. I know. I wish I could get away with that. Same thing with the cosmological constant, or lambda. Soon as Hubble said that the universe was expanding, well, then Einstein withdrew his cosmological constant and said he was incorrect about it, yet they still use it today. So explain that, where even the inventor of the cosmological constant said, oops, I made a mistake, this isn't correct. Yet because it works...
It's not constant, but we'll use it because it only fits with the system we've built.
Right, and we're afraid to go back and change it. And one thing I've noticed about science is it takes... I want to say almost a lifetime, because it's 100 years, in my opinion, but what men are so proud of what they've done that they're afraid to ever go back on that. And that's the complete opposite of science. But if you look at science over the last 500 years, nobody is disproven in their lifetime. Everyone is disproven in the next lifetime by somebody else. I don't mean but
I know what you mean, yeah.
Right, it's all disproven after the fact. So what we have now that all these guys swear by, in 50 years and 100 years, there's going to be something new that's going to disprove what they said. It just doesn't happen right away. But the sad part about it is we've got the tools to test. They didn't have the tools in 1700 to test the spherical Earth. They didn't have the technology, and we do now. And we were able to ask the questions and say, show me this curve, please. Show me the curve. Show me the pictures from space. Show me a movie of something, New York skyline upside down as the ISS goes under the Earth.
Exactly.
No, they won't show you any of that now.
Well, they can't, because they're going to be proven frauds. And just like in every other case where we're exposing the soft underbelly of the system, they are, forming lines and squadrons and and everything they can, circling the wagons to protect their theories and to protect their dominion, because the enslavement of humanity is based upon this matrix that they've built of unreality and unprovable so-called facts, and the authority aspect of it is really not cutting it for very many people anymore. You know, even a 4-year-old that asks his parent why I can't do that, and they are told because I said so, it's not a good enough answer.
Right, it's not. And it's sad to see, you know, I grew up in America where we were taught how great of a country we are and how much of a savior we are to humanity. And when you see the truth of what this savior has done, it makes me ashamed.
It's
I mean,
nauseating.
it really,
yes.
It is. It's sad because we're out there bombing for profit, killing for profit, and
pillaging and plundering for profit. And a lot of us now, there's a lot of us that are just saying, not in my name anymore, not in my name. And you have
to... not the legacy I'm going to leave.
That's right. I was looking at, I'm not sure which video of yours it was, but the quote that you had from Lewis Essen, who appeared to me to be kind of an original whistleblower on the relativity theory. I thought that was fascinating because he basically said, science students are told from the beginning to forsake that which is provable by scientific method and to accept dogma. And
absolutely, yeah.
That is, I mean, that kind of sums it up. The other
well,
thing...
I mean,
go ahead.
It's a religion, you know, and that's what's so sad. But if you look at the system that they set up, the system where they only hire the teachers to work in the universities that believe what the universities teach.
Precisely.
And from there, any student that comes into the university has to believe what they're taught. If you question it, you're laughed at. And then they have a system called peer review, which I call scientific circle jerk, because what it comes down to is the peers are people who already believe what you believe.
Right.
So how is that peer review? That, I mean, the actual definition is, or the name is correct, peer review, but that's not what it should be. It should be an open review.
Exactly.
Not just your peers. I mean, if I had a peer review about what I believe and I only took my close circle of friends and said, anybody who believes something outside of what we believe, let's all review it. Well, every paper that came in that was anything different than what we've already established, we would just push right out the door.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things when I started arguing with people, I would say, or debating them, they would ask me, well, where did you go to college? And I'll say, well, if I went to one of those colleges that you're talking about, I would just believe what you believe. So that's the point, is that I didn't go to your college. And they, well, where's your degree? I said, if I had a degree, I would believe in gravity. So what are you saying?
Thank God that we don't have degrees.
Thank God, huh?
Absolutely. You know, one thing that I have examined since I started considering this concept as to possibly the reason or the underlying theme associated with why we think we live in this gigantic universe and why we're one of cajillion planets out there, and why we're, you know, we can't possibly ever travel anywhere where there could be light because the closest star is 1.3 trillion miles away, or, you know, some other silly nonsense. And
actually 25 trillion.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the point here is to make this planet and make every living being on this planet feel so incredibly insignificant, so that there's not any real value attached to the living man or woman. There's no value attached to the splendor and the beauty of this earth that's being,
Absolutely.
you know, destroyed and pillaged and raped and plundered left, right, and center, and you know, geoengineered and chemtrailed and poisoned and fluoridated. All of those things can be done with the mindset that this is all insignificant and it doesn't add up to anything and nothing really matters.
Absolutely. You just said it. I mean, that's what I saw from these guys who are arguing on the behalf of atheism, that's their goal, is to make Christians, and I don't agree with Christianity. I don't choose Jesus as my savior, but at the same time, I respect them more than I can respect atheists whose goal is to simply make them feel insignificant. And that's the whole idea of science, is why do we care about these stars that are, according to science, 25 trillion miles away. Not one of us will ever get there. Nobody in their lifetime will ever even come close to traveling that distance. Yet this is all NASA talks about, and they've wasted $1 trillion since Apollo in tax money on nonsense, on absolute conjecture and make-believe, things that have no impact on life. And look at this world as a result. Look what
it's
they've done.
become. Absolutely. And so much of that is probably distraction because, you know, if we keep our eye on that hand, then we're not watching the other hand that's doing such harm and terrible things on the planet. And,
Absolutely.
And, think about all the money wasted trying to prove nonsense when they really don't really care whether they prove it or not. They just want you to shut up and listen and go back in your box, you know.
Right. Don't look over here, look over there.
Exactly. Just before I left, I found the definition of stupid, and I thought I would share that. It's knowing the truth, seeing the truth, and still believing the lies.
Wow.
And guess who said that? That was from Tommy Chong.
Really?
Yes. So we're wrapping it up here. I just want to acknowledge something that you have said that I think is really perfect. You have said science has given itself a get-out-of-jail-free card, no matter what the evidence says. And I think that sums everything up, honestly. No matter how we challenge it, they'll come up with some other version of their truth to keep us from finding the truth. And I really would like to urge people to really, you know, I've asked you to consider an awful lot of things that you probably thought were crazy. And when you did the research and you dug into the things that we pointed you towards, you found out, you know, that there was another myth busted, speaking of myth busters. So both Jaron and I would like to challenge you to do your own research, to go to his YouTube subscription channel, which is Jeranism, Jeranism, and look at the videos. They're very well thought out. They're very well put together. I love the graphics that you're using. They're awesome. You can also reach him on Facebook at Jeranism Changer, and you can reach him on Tumblr at jeranism.tumblr.com. So please, people, be willing to pry your minds open a little bit more than we've asked you to in the past. And if you can open your mind to this and accept this premise, then nothing else is going to be a problem for you. And I'd like to thank you very much for coming on with me, and I hope to have you back and explore some things like what is the universe, and how do we have seasons, and why do the moon and the sun look like they're exactly the same size, you know.
Excellent.
And stuff like that. So we will have you back.
Great. I really appreciate being here, and thank you very much for having me on. And I just continue to say the same thing you do. Don't believe anything I said. Take it and do your own research, and you'll come to the same conclusions. And that's when you'll ultimately, you'll ultimately realize that the lie that we've been told is a lot bigger than you probably think right now.
Absolutely. And thanks again. And we'll see you all next week. Gregory Manarino will be back in house, and keep questioning people, because that's what's going to break this matrix open. Good night.
Thank you very much, Shelly. It's nice to be here. Nice to talk to you.
So could you tell us a little bit about your history, how you came to this as a subject matter, and you know, how you integrated that into a YouTube channel that's got like 25,000 viewers or something, a lot of viewers?
Yeah, I saw today almost 3,500 subscribers, which is incredible to me, shocking. I had certainly no aspirations of that when I started. Basically, to kind of give you a quick rundown of where I come from, I was raised in a Catholic environment, extremely Catholic. My mom is a director of ministry at a church. My godfather is a bishop. I went to a Catholic junior high, all boys, Jesuit-run Catholic high school. So I was definitely in the religion mix. Mm-hmm. I'd say around the age of maybe 17, 18, I kind of started to have doubts and kind of fell away.
Astronauts to the moon.
And welcome to Our Natural Rights here on alltalkradio.net. My name is Shelly Johnson, and I had quite a few people suggest that I introduce myself because apparently nobody knows who I am. So now you do. My guest this evening is Jaron Campy. I ran across him as I was digging deeper into the flat earth concepts, and I find his arguments quite interesting. He's been through the steps of challenging his own belief systems, which you might recall I refer to as BS, and has found those systems wanting. It has been strongly suggested that I quit beating this dead horse. While I will admit that believing one way or another in the globe versus flat earth concept will not bring us the freedom that we're all desiring so strongly, what it does do is continue to pry minds open. It's because nothing we have been taught is truth. When you open your minds and are willing to question everything, then the power of the system is diminished more and more. We have viewers on this show tonight that we didn't have before when we discussed this concept. So I believe that it is quite prescient for us to have this conversation tonight and to at least energetically help counter the gigantic lie that is our daily lives based upon the illusion that the system is the world, and the system is what we've all been enslaved by. And so it's really, really important to challenge every aspect of that as far as I'm concerned. So having laid that table, welcome, Jaron, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion this evening.
I wouldn't say fully. I didn't become an atheist or anything like that. But when I met my wife, which would have been about 2009, 2008, she came from a family of very devout Bible-believing Christians. Now, she was in the same place in her life that I was, that she didn't really hold tight to those beliefs either. And so coming together, we kind of didn't really touch on that subject, on the religion subject at all, until we got married. And we knew that her family being Christian, my family being Catholic, we had a question right away is what kind of service do we want to have for our wedding? It was really important to us to cater to both families, but not, have one over the other. So we decided to go totally secular. We actually had one of my friends go up and get a license to marry us. And one thing that, I'll never forget was the night before our wedding at the rehearsal dinner, my wife's brother-in-law, who is a preacher, he has his own parish, or not a parish, what is it called? His own
congregation.
His own church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, he has his own church. He's a Christian, Bible-believing. He's a big preacher. He's got a church in Montana with thousands of members. And so he came to us and told us, who is marrying you guys tomorrow? And I said, actually, one of my friends is just going up and getting a license, and he's taking care of it. And he said, well, you two do know that your marriage will not be seen in the eyes of God if a preacher or a pastor doesn't say the service. And this is what he said to my wife, the night before we get married. And it just really kind of cemented more than anything. Like, man, what are these people doing, saying things like that?
Yeah.
We wanted to have our own thing. We just told them kind of bug off, forget about it. So right after we were married, we really wanted to dig into what we both believed and come up with something. If we're going to have kids together, we're going to live together forever, we wanted to really dig down deep into it. Mm-hmm. And so we did that, and we came to the conclusion that the Bible was written by